Egypt, a land of unanswered questions, undiscovered treasures, and centuries-old mysteries left unsolved. Today, a new generation of experts and obsessives hunts the tomb of Alexander the Great, the ancient world's mightiest warrior, buried at the heart of its mightiest empire. Now, after 2,000 years, using new research and new thinking, can Alexander's lost tomb finally be found? History records that Alexander spent just 6 months in Egypt. But those 6 months began a chain of events whose effects were felt for centuries. Today, archaeologists are trying to retrace Alexander's movements. He left every place he visited changed forever.
The steps of Alexander the Great are very important for us to follow, because every step in any place in Egypt could mean something, and we could learn something.
From the temples of Karnak and Luxor, already centuries old when Alexander went there, to a sacred oasis in the heart of the desert, from the ancient burial place of pharaohs, to the modern city which he founded and which still bears his name, Alexandria. We know Alexander was here in life, that after his death, his body traveled through this country again. But is it possible finally to complete the journey, to locate, after 22 centuries, the tomb where he was laid?
Where do you start? Where do you begin? There are no maps, just legends, stories, propaganda.
What we know of Alexander is clouded by myth, but certain facts are clear. We know that though he would make himself pharaoh, he was not Egyptian. He was a blonde-haired Greek from the kingdom of Macedonia. And we know that when he arrived in Egypt in 332 BC, he found a great nation humbled. Egypt was under the control of an occupying Persian army. When Alexander drove that army out, he was welcomed as a liberator. And the powerful class of priests who had survived Persian rule quickly gave him their support.
Then he comes into Egypt without firing a shot. Egypt more or less capitulates to his request, and I think he allows the elite to be in power in exchange for their devotion and loyalty to his reign.
Dr. Robert Bianchi has spent 2 decades tracking both Alexander and the hunt for his tomb. For him, that hunt must start by studying the walls of the largest temple complex ever built in ancient Egypt. Karnak stands near Luxor on the banks of the Nile in Upper Egypt. When Alexander came to Karnak, it was the center of religious and political power. Generation after generation of pharaohs built temples here. And every one is a statement, a demonstration of its builders' piety, power, and prestige.
We've got almost a 2,000-year span of history here. Every major pharaoh of Egyptians' history, Tutankhamun, Amenhotep III, Ramses, left their mark here because by inscribing their names in this temple, they were intercalating themselves into the glorious history of ancient Egypt.
Bianchi sees evidence of how Alexander maneuvered to become part of that history. It's in a side temple in the hieroglyphs that adorn the walls. They spell the name of Alexander, written as if he were a pharaoh. Another inscription close by bears the name of another, earlier pharaoh.
We see a hieroglyph here that represents the restoration of the monument under the majesty of the Horus, the strong bull, rising in glory in Thebes, the lord of the 2 lands, Thutmose III.
Alexander restored this temple and put his name to it. As he did so, he saluted its original builder. He honored his mighty predecessor.
And in so doing, he intercalates himself into the long tradition of Egyptian pharaohs and recognizes that his legitimacy is based on that long succession. Historians sometimes call Thutmose III the Napoleon of Egypt. So he is linking himself to a great warrior, and that enhances his own status. So Alexander saw him as his spiritual ancestor.
Alexander claimed Egypt's crown by claiming its history. He transformed himself in the eyes of the Egyptian people. First, the Greek king became a legitimate pharaoh. Then the ambition that had driven him to be a conqueror of nations drove him still further. It set him and the men that followed him on a journey fraught with risk. Andrea Kay is retracing Alexander's steps through the Western Desert, one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. She comes here because when Alexander passed this way in life, he unwittingly determined what would happen to his body after death. He bound together his future and the future of Egypt. He ensured that when he died, men would fight for the right to build his tomb.
We've got miles and miles of dunes, and it's very hard to navigate here.
Egypt's western desert stretches for 400 miles from the edge of the Nile Valley to the Libyan border. And if it's hard to cross today, it was even harder in the 4th century BC, when Alexander led his men here. Some years before, a sandstorm had destroyed an army of thousands of Persians. The risks and the hardships were enormous. There's virtually no rainfall here, yet Alexander still made the journey.
It would have taken him 7 or 8 days on horseback, and without modern maps or GPS to tell him where to go, they just sort of had a rough idea. A small town on the coast, go south about 200 miles.
Alexander was heading for Siwa, the most remote settlement in Egypt. Then, as now, Siwa was an oasis. In this vast sea of desert, it's an island of fertile land, fed by natural springs. In Alexander's time, it was also a sacred place. Home to Amun, the most powerful Egyptian god. In Egyptian tradition, Amun is the ram. He's also the father of the pharaohs. By tradition, Alexander alone entered the inner sanctum. This is the spot where he is said to have stood one day in 331 BC.
That's a pretty rare thing to be able to say, that someone thousands of years ago was standing exactly in this place. He would have looked in to have his conversation with the god, which would have been a statue, something like the rams that you see down in Karnak. The priests would have been hiding back here in this passageway. And while Alexander spoke to the god, they could hear him.
However this meeting between man and statue was played out, Alexander appears to have left with what he wanted. From this moment on, he was no longer the son of Philip II, king of Macedon. He had a new father.
By proclaiming himself the son of Amun, he is claiming that the be-all and end-all of gods, period, is his father, and that gives him the religious propaganda legitimacy that he needs to underwrite his empire.
For more than 3,000 years, Egypt's pharaohs had been Egyptian. Now a Greek sat on the throne, a new dynasty ruled, and a new era dawned. Alexander left Egypt after just 6 months, and he never returned. 8 years later, and hundreds of miles away in Babylon, he died from a mystery illness. Still, the bond he had forged with this place was not broken. His remains were brought back to Egypt. Then, whoever possessed his lifeless body held the right to rule here. Now, whoever finds it again finds one of the greatest prizes in archaeology. Alexander maneuvered to gain total control of Egypt. He made himself pharaoh, declared himself the son and heir of Amun, the Egyptian god of gods. He and Egypt were so bound together that he would control its future even in death.
There's a tradition that he who holds the body of Alexander holds Egypt and holds power.
It gives rise to one of the greatest questions in archaeology. Where is the body of Alexander? Many scholars would like to solve the mystery. Dr. Nick Saunders is one of them. He spent 20 years on the trail of Alexander's tomb, and he's convinced the way to find it is through the man who brought the body back to Egypt.
His body became a tool. It became a symbolic weapon used by his successor generals, fighting amongst themselves, trying to gain control of the body, trying to use it as a symbol and a justification that they were the natural successor to Alexander.
Alexander had appointed a successor, the general Perdiccas. He was charged with burying the dead king, but he never got the chance. Another general, Ptolemy, saw that Alexander's remains had tremendous symbolic value. History doesn't record what Perdiccas planned to do with the mummified body. It may be that he intended to build Alexander a tomb near his father in his native Macedonia. But we can never be sure. Ptolemy hijacked the body and carried it to Egypt.
Ptolemy thought he would gamble everything, grab hold of Alexander's mummified body, and use it as his own legitimation for his own kingdom of Egypt. Perdiccas and Ptolemy fought a huge battle on the banks of the Nile. Perdiccas lost, and Ptolemy sealed his future as the king of Egypt.
As the victor, Ptolemy could rule unopposed. He built a dynasty that would last for 300 years. Its very foundations lay in the body of Alexander. And because of this, Saunders reasons, Ptolemy first laid Alexander to rest in the heart of his kingdom, in Egypt's capital.
What he almost certainly did was to bring it to Memphis, the cosmic center of the Egyptian universe. That's where he was, that's where he needed Alexander to be.
There'd been a settlement here for more than 2,000 years. This land was once filled with temples and palaces. And in the 4th century BC, Memphis was Egypt's political heart. It was still more important as its burial ground. For centuries, Egyptians buried their dead here. This patch of desert is known as the Saqqara Necropolis. And this is where Saunders believes Ptolemy brought Alexander.
We're basically standing on the boundary between life and death here. To the east lies Memphis, the land of the living, the city of the living, the great capital of Egypt. And to the west lies the endless desert and the setting sun, the realm of the dead.
The route that Saunders is walking is the Serapeum Way, the processional path between Memphis and Saqqara. At the end is the place where Egypt's oldest pyramid, the Step Pyramid, stands. Alexander's strategy had been to portray himself as the latest in a line of pharaohs that stretched back to the dawn of history.
It was in Ptolemy's interest in making this a big event. It showed that he was the successor to Alexander in Egypt. It showed that he paid respect to ancient Egyptian burial customs and beliefs. And so he was killing several birds with one stone.
Can any proof be found that this was where Ptolemy brought Alexander? The more Saunders explores, the more he sees a connection with Egypt's new rulers. The Serapeum Way ends in a labyrinth of tunnels winding deep into the rock. They are tombs, but they were cut some 1,000 years before Alexander and Ptolemy. They house the bodies not of kings, but of animals. These are the tombs of Apis bulls, worshipped in life, then mummified. The granite coffins in which they were buried weigh as much as 60 tons. In time, Ptolemy's descendants would worship their version of this deity. They would call it Serapis, and it would be the protective god of their city, Alexandria. Logic dictates that this site is a prime candidate for the location of Alexander's tomb. But what evidence is there on the ground? A major clue can be found just a few yards from the Serapeum. This semicircle of statues was first discovered by a French archaeologist called Mariette in the 19th century. What's important is that it doesn't belong. Though the statues are badly damaged, one thing is clear: they're Greek.
When Mariette actually studied these sculptures in detail, he discovered a strange thing, that they represented famous Greek philosophers. He also realized they were made from local Egyptian limestone. How had they got here, and what did they represent?
They're not just a fusion of Greek and Egyptian cultures. Each one represents someone who had a very powerful link to Alexander the Great. Homer was the writer of the Iliad and the Odyssey. Alexander took Achilles, Homer's great warrior hero, as his role model. Pindar was one of Greece's greatest poets. His works praise Alexander's ancestors. Plato was one of the giants of Western philosophy, and also the tutor of Aristotle, who in turn tutored Alexander. Nick Saunders has reason to believe that Ptolemy placed these statues here.
Perhaps one of the reasons why Ptolemy commissioned these sculptures is that they reference the ancient world that Alexander knew so well. We have to remember he was educated in the great Greek literature and plays and philosophers. So this would have been an ideal reference, a physical place, a physical face for the tomb of Alexander the Great.
Saunders is convinced that Alexander was buried in Saqqara, but that's not the end of the story. Because the evidence says that if the tomb was found here, it would be empty. A widely believed account written by the ancient Greek Pausanias records that Alexander's body was moved from the site just 30 years after Ptolemy laid it here. It was taken to the city that Alexander had founded, Egypt's flourishing new capital of Alexandria. The trail now leads north, in search of a glittering tomb that was said to have been built here. Can any trace be found of a structure where emperors once came to pay homage? Alexander's lost tomb. Alexander gave his name to over 30 cities. In his hunt for the warrior king's tomb, Dr. Nick Saunders has come to the greatest of them. Though Alexandria was founded by Alexander, it was built by his successor, Ptolemy. It was constructed as a Greek city in Egypt, the strategic, economic and cultural focus of a new ruling dynasty. In 280 BC, Ptolemy's son brought Alexander's body here from the southern city of Memphis. With this act, he made Alexandria one of the most famous cities in antiquity.
In ancient times, everybody knew where Alexander the Great's tomb was. This was one of the greatest tourist attractions of all time, to visit Alexander's golden tomb. Today, 2,000 years later, people are still coming to touch the magic of Alexander's ghost, and some, indeed, to search for the tomb.
These tomb hunters, scores of them over the centuries, have come to be known as the Fools of Alexander.
We get a whole range of people who come with ideas about, they know the secret of where Alexander's really lying. But Unfortunately for them, it's always just beyond reach. They always fall at the last post, and that's the nature of the fools of Alexander.
Ancient sources record that up until at least the 3rd century AD, successive Roman emperors came to the tomb, eager to forge some kind of connection with the greatest king the world had ever known.
They all wanted to come to Alexandria and to visit his tomb, to seal their own legitimacy in one sense as the Roman successor of the great Greek Alexander. It's the only person in history that they wanted to compare themselves to. They wanted to see the superhero of the age.
In the late 5th century AD, the Western Roman Empire fell. Like so much in the chaos of the Dark Age that followed, the tomb disappeared. Today's Alexandria bears little resemblance to the one in which the tomb stood. Centuries of rebuilding have pushed the ancient city far below street level. This is now a city of 4 million people. The tomb has been lost for 1,600 years. Legends, half-truths and outright lies have also obscured what we know about it. Dr. Zahi Hawass has come to Alexandria's Nabi Daniel Mosque, a place which for more than 100 years had tomb hunters enthralled. In about 1850, a Greek interpreter named Shlizi emerged from the crypt where Hawass now descends and made an extraordinary claim.
He came inside, there was no stairs, and it was like an adventure to go down. And he looked and he said that he saw Alexander the Great was buried in this place. If you actually look here, it has arches, it has a place for the tomb.
Shlizi's story was widely believed. This site was thought to be the most likely location of the tomb right up until 1958.
Archaeologists came and they excavated and they found no evidence that this could be Alexander the Great's tomb. But it's important to investigate every place that people believed that the tomb of Alexander the Great existed.
Even if someone did find Alexander's burial chamber, how would they recognize it? Archaeologists have built a picture of how Alexander's tomb could look by studying royal burials in his homeland. In modern-day Greece, the town of Vergina stands on what was once the capital of ancient Macedonia. This royal tomb lay hidden for more than 2,000 years. It shows the way Alexander's forebears were buried. Its entrance resembles a Greek temple. Its frescoes depict a typical hunting scene. And its contents are a treasure trove. Armor, jewels, and a gold coffin emblazoned with the Macedonian sun. Scholars believe the remains inside could be those of Alexander's uncle or of Alexander's family. Whoever was buried here, it seems very clear he was part of the elite from which Alexander came. It may be that Alexander even features in the hunting scene. So was Alexander laid to rest in a Macedonian-style tomb beneath the streets of the city that he had founded? It is possible to get a glimpse of ancient Alexandria, the city that, as part of Alexander's legacy, became for a while one of the greatest in the world.
By coming down into the depths of the city, into these underground water systems, we actually get 20 or 30, sometimes 40 feet nearer to the city that Alexander first designed. Even though we're probably nearer to Alexander the Great's tomb down here in the system, we need to try and locate it on the surface. You need perspective in order to get an idea of where the ancient city was, how it was divided up, and where the location of Alexander's tomb might be.
One thing we do know is that for centuries, Alexander's tomb was far from forgotten. It was a tourist attraction. In fact, this was a culture where graves were places of regular pilgrimage, part of the city and part of life. Archaeologist Ed Lewis visits a burial complex typical of the time. He sees how the tombs of early Alexandria reflect the city's blend of Egyptian and Greek culture. He also sees how important they were to the living.
In many respects, these necropolis were a focal point for celebrations. It would be a family outing on a day. They'd come here with food. They would picnic almost, and almost as if they were with their dead.
In this fusion of Greek and Egyptian architecture, there may be fresh clues as to how Alexander's tomb looked. Egyptian sphinxes sit alongside Doric columns. In an echo of the tomb at Vergina, a relief depicts Macedonian horsemen.
In its heyday, it would have been much more colorful. You can see the bright reds next to the tomb, and you can assume that there would have been other colors as well. Blues, which can be seen in the other necropolises in Alexandria. So in terms of the architectural style, it could very much be in line with what Alexander's tomb could have been like.
Of course, these tombs are far too modest to have housed the body of Alexander. Their size and location suggest they belong to the family of a high-ranking official. According to ancient sources, Alexander's tomb was situated within a soma, its own walled enclosure. And logic dictates that it must have been constructed on a grand scale. For the past 10 years, Andrew Chugg has been trying to piece together all the information we have about Alexander's tomb.
There are fragmentary remains of the ancient world, and they are like small elements of a jigsaw puzzle which we can start to put together, and we can start to see a picture of what the ancient city might have been like, where the tomb might have been, what it might have looked like.
Chugg's research has led him here to the oldest tombs in Alexandria, the Al-Shatbi necropolis. Dating from the 3rd century BC, they made headlines when they were first discovered in 1893 by an archaeologist called Joannides. What struck him was that they had a clear Greek influence. Joannides took this evidence and, stretching it to the extreme, claimed he had found the tombs of both Alexander the Great and Cleopatra. He was met with justifiable skepticism.
Joannides was widely disbelieved, and there are some skeptical press reports from the newspapers in Cairo at the time, because the location is completely wrong, and really it's nowhere near high enough quality or style to be a royal tomb.
But the necropolis might hold one clue which could help in the search. Though these columns have suffered considerable damage, Chugg believes they have something to tell us about the tomb of Alexander.
These seem to be funerary monuments. They're particularly interesting to me because they seem to have the form of classical Hellenistic mausoleums. And we know they were tall, rectangular buildings with stepped pyramidal roofs.
The early Alexandrians built classical-style Greek tombs. Chugg reasons that if we want to know how Alexander was buried, we should look at descriptions of the first and archetypal mausoleum. Widely written about, it was deemed one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Standing 140 feet high and carved from marble, the mausoleum was adorned with ornate statues and topped out by a distinctive pyramidal roof. It was built around the time of Alexander's birth.
It does appear as though very many Ptolemaic and Hellenistic mausoleums took the mausoleum at Halicarnassus as their model.
Today's tomb hunters have a strong idea of the kind of tomb that lay at the heart of the city. Now new theories are emerging that may help them take the final step. Can they at last pinpoint the location of Alexander's tomb? Dr. Saunders has identified one point on the landscape that has survived from antiquity. It may prove to be a crucial piece of the puzzle.
There is no X marks the spot. The whole city has changed, and the only point that still exists, the only geographic point of reference we have, is that peninsula over there. That's exactly in the same position as it was 2,500 years ago, and it's all we have to give us a clue to where we might search for the tomb.
The Lochias Peninsula, known as the Inner Palaces, was once the site of the pharaoh's residence.
This would have been one of the most elite areas of the ancient Mediterranean world. Marble palaces, gold and silver fittings, stone sculptures, and extraordinarily rich place to live for the royal family and their entourage.
Saunders now follows a path that may once have linked these private royal palaces to larger, more public official buildings. Today, this area is home to the modern descendant of ancient Alexandria's most famous building, its library. Here, Saunders finds an ancient description of this area, which could help him identify the site of the tomb.
The Soma, as it is called, is part of the royal district. This was the walled enclosure which contained the burial places of the kings and that of Alexander.
Many scholars consider the Greek geographer Strabo as the most reliable of the ancient sources. His is an eyewitness account.
He was here in 24 BC, and he was walking around exactly where we are now, making notes, and saw the body of Alexander in the tomb firsthand.
Saunders' reading of this account leads him to a busy junction in a district known as the Macerata.
As strange as it may seem, it wasn't totally different from today. A whole range of street sellers outside, selling wine, selling food, selling meat. That whole area would have had an enclosure around it within which Alexander's tomb and the Ptolemies' final resting places would have been. Large, polished marble mausolea, touched by the memory and the power of Alexander the Great himself.
For Saunders, it makes perfect sense to locate the tomb here.
This is the center of power. This is where Alexander needed to be.
The problem is, Strabo's isn't the only account. Other writers talk about the tomb, even if their descriptions of its location can seem vague.
Ptolemy built in the middle of the city of Alexandria a memorial building, and he laid there all his forefathers, together with his mother, and also Alexander, the Macedonian.
Andrew Chugg has spent 10 years studying the ancient sources. He's convinced that putting all the information together will lead him to the tomb.
My view is that the key to the search is to try and find an explanation which makes sense of all the small fragments of evidence at the same time.
He believes the key piece of information is that Alexander's tomb was located in the center of the city, close to a crossroads. No maps of ancient Alexandria survive, but some do exist which were made in the 19th century before the city was modernized. By superimposing these maps on top of each other, Chugg finds an area he thinks is worth looking at.
We're particularly interested in this section which sticks out on the eastern side and encompasses the central crossroads. We can see it on this map in much more detail.
There is a problem. The crossroads remain around 1/4 of a mile from the royal palaces district mentioned by Strabo.
The solution seems to be if you have what the sources tell us, which is that the enclosure of the tomb of Alexander was very large and very magnificent. If you make the enclosure of the tomb large enough, then it reaches right the way up and have the connection between the palace area and the tomb around the central crossroads in an enormous enclosure.
Chugg's theory imagines Alexander's tomb complex as covering all the vast area between the royal palaces district and the central crossroads. No tomb could be too large for the man who had conquered most of the known world. Chugg finds evidence to back his claim in these gardens. This is the surviving northeastern section of a wall that once ringed the city. It was built hundreds of years after scholars believe the tomb was lost, but Chugg believes its structure is part of the original enclosure, Alexander's Soma.
It consists of enormous blocks of shelly limestone. They have these margins cut around the edge of them. They're highly characteristic of a Ptolemaic period wall. To me, what this wall signifies is the best piece of physical evidence for where the Soma enclosure of Alexander's tomb is to be found.
If Chugg is right, then this wall is a chance to visualize the great tomb built for Alexander.
It would have extended 600 meters to the south and 800 meters to the west. Somewhere inside that huge enclosure would have stood a magnificent mausoleum, and underneath it, the tomb chamber of the most glamorous king in the ancient world.
Chugg's theory is an ingenious way of making the facts fit. It reconciles the differences between the accounts given in the ancient sources, and it offers a plausible answer to the question of the tomb's location. What it lacks is the solid archaeological evidence which would solve the puzzle once and for all. In Alexandria, that kind of evidence is hardest to come by. What there is confusing and contradictory. Dr. Zahi Hawass has come to a site in the area called the Latin Cemeteries, just a few hundred yards from the place identified by Andrew Chugg. Here in 1907, a dig unearthed 4 giant slabs of alabaster. Reconstructed, they formed this tomb. In ancient Egyptian tradition, alabaster is the stone of the god Amun. And Hawass believes it would have made sense to build an alabaster tomb for Alexander.
Alexander the Great himself, as the son of Amun-Re, should be protected by Amun-Re himself in the shape of alabaster. It's very smooth, and that is a typical style of royalty. No nobleman or an official could afford this alabaster except he should be a king.
The exterior is left rough. Hawass believes the tomb was buried, like the tombs of Alexander's ancestors.
If you look at the style of this tomb, it's unfinished and it was under the ground. It's completely Macedonian.
There are striking similarities between this and the tomb that many believe was built for Alexander's family. It has the signature temple-like facade. These stairs may be the final clinching piece of evidence.
Maybe it was introduced by a temple here that the priestess will come and go down to the stairs and give offering to the deceased king. And I really believe that this is the location of the tomb of this great man, Alexander the Great.
We're absolutely certain that the alabaster tomb belonged to a highly important Greek-born Macedonian. It's an extraordinary monument, but the idea that it could have been the tomb of Alexander doesn't stand up to scrutiny in any way.
Again, the problems are to do with location. Is the tomb close enough to the heart of the city? And size, is it large enough to be the tomb of Alexander? Recent excavations have drawn a blank here. The lack of concrete proof means that, as with so much in the story of Alexander, anything seems possible. We do know that Alexander and Alexandria are bound by more than a name. He founded this city, though he never saw it grow. He never saw it flourish into what was for a time the most powerful city in the world. Now, somewhere beneath 22 centuries of history, it hides his tomb. But at the end of the 4th century AD, a series of religious revolutions rocked Egypt. First, the Christian faith held sway, then Islam. The cult of Alexander was driven underground. His great tomb was forgotten or torn down. the whereabouts of his body was lost.
I think one of the real possibilities was that he was protected by people who still believed in the old religion, the old Greco-Roman pagan religion.
Many scholars have come to believe that the time came when Alexander's tomb was emptied and his body transported to a place of safety. Dr. Zahi Hawass has followed the trail to Bahariya Oasis, 200 miles from Alexandria. Here in 1996, a donkey belonging to a member of his team literally stumbled upon one of the greatest finds in Egyptology. Excavations soon revealed this area to be a cemetery. Some of the burials were so rich, this place is now known as the Valley of the Golden Mummies. Different races, different traditions. Something had drawn a huge range of people here in vast numbers.
They were Roman, they were Greek, they were Bedouin, they were Egyptians. They lived together at Bahariya Oasis. And they were buried together in this great golden cemetery.
What better place to hide the pagan lord than amongst this huge burial field of thousands of others, and anonymously so?
What drew people to this remote site? The answer may lie in this temple, the oldest structure on the site, and though its construction appears humble, its walls bear the image of antiquity's greatest warrior, the self-proclaimed pharaoh and god, Alexander.
This is Alexander the Great standing and holding some offering here in his hand. And we have here Amun on the other side.
He claimed Amun as his father. The temple had become a center, away from the great cities of Egypt, for the cult that believed in Alexander's divine status. There is evidence to suggest this site was a place of worship as late as the 17th century AD.
When Egypt became Christian, there's no church in Bahariya. They may well have been using Alexander's age-old pagan temple as a kind of meeting place, a congregation place. This suggests that the early Greek Christians had a strange relationship with Alexander the Great.
We do know there are more mummies, perhaps thousands, unexamined, undiscovered, beneath this landscape. It's impossible to rule out the idea that Alexander's body lies among them.
The only thing that I'm sure of, that the people who were buried here, they wanted to be near Alexander the Great.
The tomb of Alexander may never be found, but what has become clear is that he had more than one burial. It's somehow fitting for a man who held so many titles, played so many roles, had so much power. We know that he was buried first in Memphis, probably in the Saqqara necropolis. It's certain he was then transported to lie in the north, in his Alexandrian tomb. He lay at the heart of the ancient world. It seems possible that even after the great empires fell, his cult endured, and his body remained in secret as an object of worship. Until that body is found, people will continue to search for it.